So now, statement 17 in that chapter on the vital points pertaining to the three turnings of the wheel of Dharma. So here, 16, sorry, let's start with 16 first. 16 says, valid knowledge is the Buddha's knowing wisdom. Valid knowledge is the Buddha's knowing wisdom. So here, again, to point out, in order for us to really appreciate what is being said here, valid knowledge is a technical term that is often translated as, so valid knowledge, sometimes it's called valid cognition. And so this is a term that is used in the formal study of logic. The formal study of logic being one of the fields of studies or one of the fields of knowledge in classical Indian Buddhism in Nalanda times. And that tradition was, of course, also brought to Tibet, whereby Tibetan scholars also mastered this system known as valid cognition, the formal study of logic. So it's a particular logic system, pramana in Sanskrit. This, as I mentioned, formal study of logic, this particular logic system, has its roots in the Buddha's emphasis on the use of reasoning. Reasoning as opposed to simply believing something, accepting something, because we say, these are sacred traditions that have come down to us and we cannot question. Reasoning instead of, out of fear, you say, no, don't ask any questions, just follow. And so the Buddha says that we should use reasoning. And in fact, in many of the teachings that he gave, instead of invoking tradition, instead of invoking, instead of invoking something like him saying, well, I'm awake, I know, so you accept. I have seen everything, so you have to accept. Instead of saying that, and instead of saying, you cannot understand, you should just accept, otherwise bad things will happen to you, and things like that. He doesn't go that route. He says, here, let's consider this. Let's look into this. So you say this. Now let's look into this. Now, do you agree or not that this is such the case? Yes. Okay. Now, if this is the case, now let's take a further step. And so he used reasoning. So, for example, when someone comes and says, there's no such thing as karma, cause and effect, extending over many lifetimes. If there's anything that you call cause and effect, this cause and effect, this principle of karmic causality, it's just all about this life. Then Buddha will also say, well, hold on. If we say it's only limited to this life, and actions and their results do not stretch, beyond this life, then wouldn't we run into this problem? As in, using reason, can you see that, you'll run into this problem? And then you'll run into this problem. And then you'll run into this problem. So, by necessity, you have to see that karmic causality. While the most important lesson of karmic causality, of course, is about right now. But in order to have a more comprehensive understanding, it needs to also be extending through many lifetimes. So Buddha used reasoning rather than command, rather than intimidation. So from there, over time, so you could say that the Buddhist family is already predisposed to using reasoning. Then later, as Buddhism developed in India, and as other religious traditions developed in India, the use of reasoning gain another important function, which is for Buddhists to be able to answer the challenges of non-Buddhist systems. And so in India, it was very much part of the intellectual tradition of India for the different spiritual systems and traditions, and therefore the different philosophies that have developed from these traditions to debate each other. Even within the Buddha's lifetime, you see people coming up identified as a shramana, a religious person of this or that group, coming up to the Buddha and saying, "So, we hear that you teach this. Well, how about this? How about that?" So even within the Buddha's life, you have things like this, people like this. So as Buddhism, developed in India more and more, and as, all the different groups and society becomes more and more complex, people's knowledge base becomes greater and greater. So then these debates, these questionings of each other became more and more organized and more refined. And so, of course, then Buddhists have to develop this set of tools. And over time then, even it was accepted in India that in order for us who belong to different traditions, different faiths, and not just within one tradition, but across all traditions, within the Buddhist family, there are different groups that are debating each other. Between Buddhist and non-Buddhist groups, that was also going on. So then eventually, everyone agreed that in order for us to have meaningful debates, so debates are not arguing, out of emotions. Debate is principled discussion, you could say. So in order for us to have civilized, so to say, and fruitful debates, we have to accept the terms of the debate. In other words, we have to accept the rules. So one of the terms of the debate would be something like, if you and I are debating, and you have your own source texts, your holy scriptures, and I have my own holy scriptures, and they don't happen to be the same holy scriptures, then in that case, when we debate, when we discuss, you cannot quote your scriptures and expect me to accept what your scriptures are saying. Likewise, I cannot quote my scriptures and insist that you accept the authority of my scriptures, because that's at the heart of what is being debated, whether I accept your scriptures as having any validity or not. So it has to be based on other, right? Other standards. And so over time, you could say a set of secular, maybe that word maybe not entirely accurate, but you could say a set of secular standards became accepted by everyone. So that tradition, that tradition of the study of formal logic and the use of formal logic came to Tibet, and Tibetans started to learn that. And that system is known as, here translated as, valid knowledge or valid cognition. Now here, when Kyopa says, valid cognition is the Buddha's knowing wisdom, what he's doing here is, he knows how people are using this term valid knowledge or valid cognition. And for the most part, when people were using this term and using it excitedly, they were talking about the formal logic system, the formal system, which all its complexities. Here, Kyopa, he is predictably, for those of you who have some taste of Kyopa's style of teaching this material, he wants to say that actually the real valid cognition, the real valid knowledge is the knowledge that Buddhas attain. Anything short of that cannot really be called valid knowledge, valid cognition. Anything short of Buddha's wisdom will be, to some degree or another, invalid, mistaken, obscured. Yes, so in this way, in a way, he kind of silences, all the various debates and arguments and say, well, this is valid. No, that is not valid. Mine is valid. Yours is not valid. Yeah. And he says, only Buddha's wisdom is true valid knowledge, valid cognition, unmistaken knowing. You could call it that, valid knowledge, unmistaken knowing. Only Buddha's wisdom. So let's look at Khenpo Kunpal's commentary. Since valid knowledge, this pramana, means undeceiving, the supreme among all kinds of valid knowledge is only the exalted Buddha's wisdom that knows the ultimate nature and that knows the total extent of phenomena. The total extent of phenomena refers to the complete unmistaken workings of cause and effect. What kind of causes are involved in producing the colors of a peacock's feather? What kinds of causes and effects are involved in a particular person's conditions of happiness or suffering? Continuing in the commentary, this is because his wisdom is endowed with the supreme quality of being undeceiving. Master Dhyana. So Dhyana is quoted because Dhyana is one of the giants of this system of formal study of logic in India. So Khenpo Kunpal here quotes him and says, I bow down to the one who embodies valid knowledge and wishes to benefit beings, the teacher, the Sugata, the savior. So Dhyana says, yes, in fact, Khenpo Kunpal says, yes, in fact, the greatest, one of the greatest figures in Indian Buddhism that developed this formal system of logic. In fact, at the beginning of his writing, this book that we all study, he says, the ultimate absolute valid knowledge is the Buddha. And so, therefore, that is finally what we're talking about. So elsewhere in other commentaries of Gongchik, in the larger commentary, it tells us that that part of the context of Jigten Sungen saying this, uttering this line, that the valid cognition refers to the Buddha's wisdom, is because, and let me read for you what it says, like the opposing view, so to say. People claim that valid knowledge is not part of Buddha Dharma, since it is also commonly studied within the Vedic systems of the non-Buddhists. So part of the context in which Kyoba said this statement is that there is no need. Valid knowledge, the system called valid knowledge, is not specific to Buddhists. In fact, it developed in India merely as a means of debating non-Buddhists. So there was a view in Tibet too, and this, I would say, is the other extreme view. One extreme view is, valid knowledge, valid knowledge, valid knowledge, valid knowledge, valid cognition, valid cognition. And one extreme is to say the valid cognition or valid knowledge, is the formal system of logic that has developed. One is to say, and then therefore all of us have to study that to become clear in our minds. We have to study that. We have to master that. And if that is the case, I'll be the first one to fail. It's really complex. And I would even say it's based on, again, a particular logic system that was relevant to Indians. And perhaps then it became relevant in Tibet. But as we know, or I should say, we should know that logic systems are in some ways, right, self-referential. It is based on a particular set of givens that a particular group accepts. Yeah, but then there are those, who insist, oh no, valid knowledge, that is universal, that is universal, that is universal. We have to study, So that's one extreme. The other extreme, which this commentary says Kyopa is addressing, is to say, oh, this thing called valid knowledge, this valid cognition business, that's just simply out of necessity. That Indian Buddhists have to develop that, and it's not particular to the Buddhist tradition. It's simply to debate Hindus. And since there are no Hindus in Tibet, or there are no non-Buddhists in Tibet, then that's okay. We don't need this. In fact, we know that Atisha, 2-3 generations before Jigten Sungen, and Atisha was an important figure for Jigten Sungen, by the way. We know, we have quotes from Atisha that says to his disciples, no, don't get into this. No need to study this formal logic system called valid cognition, because there's no non-Buddhists here to debate. No need to study that. So Atisha did say that. Now, is Kyopa necessarily responding to Atisha? I don't think so, not necessarily. I think Kyopa is simultaneously wanting us to recognize that reasoning can help us get a clearer understanding of the Buddha's teachings. And then through training in those teachings, we remove the obscurations of our minds, we remove the poisons, we remove the eight worldly concerns, the mundane concerns, and then achieve the Buddha's wisdom. And the Buddha's wisdom is the true or the ultimate unmistaken knowing, the true and the ultimate valid cognition, valid knowledge. And that is a property of Buddhas. So in some ways you could say he's taking us on the middle way. Neither getting carried away by the logic system and mastering it and all of that, nor dismissing its function. By taking us back to, I would say, a characteristic of the Buddha's approach, which is to use reason. He reasons with us rather than he commands us. And then to see that this reasoning has a role to play for us to achieve Buddha wisdom. And that Buddha wisdom is the ultimate valid cognition, valid knowledge. Any questions here? It's easy, like we are so educated now, especially, with all these ideas and everything. So sometimes we get so much into the debates. So whether it's the Indian system or whatever system, we have our own system of logic too and debate. Although these days debates have become like just hurling insults at each other. And then also, especially on Twitter and Facebook and whatever, that is what some people think debate is. Then, not surprisingly, some of us just like, I don't want to talk about that. So these are like the two extremes, in our context. Yes?
How would you use reasoning when in talking to someone about rebirth who does not particularly think that's an accurate way?
Well, now here is not exactly the place. There's a big topic,
I know it is.
I have covered it a few times, you try to remember that. Basically, I would say there are three positions possible. One, we are here with no rhyme or reason. This is just purely material. And things happen without rhyme or reason. Two, things happen because there is some kind of being or entity that has a plan. Three, karmic causality. So the issue of rebirth is grounded in karmic causality. So those are the three positions. So if people want to talk about rebirth, first they have to understand, there's so many contexts where people might want to talk about rebirth. Some because they're interested in in my past life, was I Cleopatra or was I Leonardo da Vinci, presumably someone is asking you, hey, why do you Buddhists believe in rebirth? Or why do your particular kind of Buddhists are so insistent on rebirth? If that's how they're asking the question, then you say, well, my belief in rebirth is grounded in karmic causality, in a commitment to living my life according to karmic causality. Then when it comes to living my life according to the principle of karmic causality, then you have to ask the question, why do things happen? 3 possible positions. Of the 3 possible positions, the other 2 is untenable. Someone has decided, someone is in charge. Well, then what is there for me to do? Right? So that one, no. Second one, no rhyme or reason. It then renders actions pointless if there's no rhyme or reason why things happen. Third, karmic causality. Then, yes, next step, karmic causality. Well, just this life is enough. Why talk about so many lives? Well, look around, certain people having a great time doing very terrible things. So why limit to here? Because when you limit it to here, you end up learning the wrong lessons. You only see a snapshot. And then you say, well, not a snapshot, a lifetime. Well, isn't a lifetime just a snapshot then? Yes, so certainly this reasoning maybe cannot convince someone that there is rebirth, but this reasoning is enough to also say to someone, whatever you think is so reasonable about your position, it's limited. And so the Buddha never said, I know better, I have seen rebirth, accept it. In fact, somebody said to him like that, why don't we just talk about this life? He said, no, you cannot just talk about this life. Because if you only look at the evidence that you're able to see within this life, you have a very limited view of what karmic causality is. People who lie, cheat, and steal, are doing pretty well. And then also, as we know now, more and more, right? It's where you are born with, who you're born to. That maybe 80% has been decided what direction you're going to have in your life. This idea of like, if you only work hard, you will get to a good place. Have you seen how hard poor people work? And they're not getting anywhere. This lie of, if only you work hard. If you work hard and you have parents of a certain type living in a certain area, yeah. Then that question, how come? How come? This person is born here and this person is born there. Oh, no rhyme or reason. Oh, God, the universe decided. Those two. You can say to that person, whoever it is asking, you can accept that? I cannot accept that. Yeah, so this is as good as reasoning gets, right?
Yeah.
The other person will say, oh, no, I can accept that. Well, okay, good for you, but I cannot.
There's no point in discussing beyond that point.
Yes, exactly. So it's just like, to the degree that we can talk about it, this is the reasoning. See, so I'm not saying we go try to convince someone. It's just when someone asks us, why do you believe? Well, here are the choices, So it's based on reasoning. It's not, Buddha says I should believe it. There is, in fact, this study of pramana. One of the topics that they handle in like their textbook is this thing about many lifetimes. And there have been many past lifetimes, and there will be future lifetimes unless you break out of this prison called samsara. And it used a particular logic system. And truth is, friends who have studied that, they're like, yeah, but it's not very convincing. Because again, it's embedded, this logic system is embedded within a logic system that operated in ancient India and certain givens of the Indian context, And so I can sympathize with those who say, this thing called valid knowledge, this field of formal study of Buddhist logic, is it's not cannot be universalized. I can sympathize with that. For those who say, this is not part of Buddha Dharma. It just developed out of a necessity to debate and to kind of articulate Buddhist beliefs in a sea of beliefs, to distinguish Buddhist beliefs, Buddhist position in an ocean of different, possible religious positions that existed in India. India was a very vibrant environment for those types of questionings, those types of debates. But nonetheless, Kyopa here is reminding us, we have gone too far if we completely dismiss this. And we have gone too far if we don't understand that. Actually, when we talk about Buddha wisdom, we are also talking about the same thing. Except that the formal system, in and of itself, the formal system that have developed in and of itself, cannot deliver us to Buddha wisdom. So again, many of these statements in Gongchik, they began in a particular context. In this context is 12th century. Kyopa Rinpoche is addressing these ideas that are floating around, circulating, these ideas that have come into his community. As I said, right, the broader context is like, he is a master famous for guiding people through meditation, helping them, see through confusion, all of that. And so he wasn't known as as a super professor necessarily, or a wizard, in teaching, magical skills, or, there are lots of different specialization in 12th century, different areas, people are learning different fields of knowledge, and then the masters in tantric theory, then the masters in Madhyamaka philosophy, and so there's lots of that. But in this valley in Drigong, is a famous meditation master, which was what Jigten Sumgan was. So people who wander into his community were a lot of them have been wandering around, studying with different teachers, mastering different fields of knowledge. And that was common. And I think even people who came to Drigong, there was no expectation that they're going to stay there for the rest of their lives. Right? It's part of their kind of sampling, so to say, but very serious sampling, right? Staying a few years, at least a few months, because in part, travel is not so easy, Now that travel is very easy, we can just go to one place for 2 days and then we go to the next place. And it takes forever to get from valley to valley, Once you get to one valley, you're like, okay, I'm going to stay here for a while, Even if things are not so agreeable to you, okay, well, to get to the next valley, it's a lot of work. So I'm just going to stay put, right? Then something can actually change, These days, when everything is all so fast, right? Someone will turn up at Urban Dharma, attend one session, on that day, their mood is not good, or my mood, the teacher, is not good, then things don't sound so good, then it's like, oh no, this is not for me. Off to the next place. Internet, even worse, click, watch for 2 seconds, no, click, no, click, no, click, right? Nothing, as we say in the past, right? That expression, right? A rolling stone gathers no moss, right? here's our condition, here's our situation. Now, everything is so fast. So happiness and suffering also very fast. His Holiness says, now we have really developed our instruments of happiness and suffering to become so powerful. And especially the instruments of suffering that we have created, that human beings collectively have created, have become so powerful, so that then instant karma can be seen more and more and more. In one instant, right, we can destroy this whole earth. Blow up a few, right, nuclear weapons. In one instant, we can destroy so much. This is where we are now, you know. Anyway, back to Kyopa. So in his communities, people came and other communities during that time. So he will overhear, you know, people with all these different ideas, different interpretations coming from different places. So he might overhear someone 2 or 3 months having a conversation about, well, you know, pramana is really, really important to study. You know, without understanding this logic system, you cannot all of that. Or someone saying, no, this pramana thing, you know, it's just because in India, you know, there are non-Buddhists and they're intellectually very sophisticated, and so Buddhists have to learn this to debate them. You know, here there are no such people. We can just get rid of that. So it's within that kind of, you know, either him overhearing or people coming to him and say, is it true that right? Then these statements are given. And these statements, right, that he made. So that is 16. 17 pertains also to this issue of valid knowledge. And so briefly here, so statement 17 would elaborate. And usually the first statement on a particular topic, if there's more than one statement, usually the first statement is more general and second statement is more specific. Now, again, the nature of these statements is not necessarily on the same occasion that Kyopa said these two things. You have to remember that. This is basically Sherab Jungne, right? His successor, his main spiritual successor and nephew and attendant. He wrote down these statements that he remembered. Unfortunately, if only Sherab Jungne also gave the exact circumstance he heard the statement, then we would be able to have more clear take-home lessons. And so the only context we have is in an old commentary, one of the oldest commentary, where it does give you a line that says, well, other people assert, other people tend to say ... But here, Kyopa says, and then the statement. That's the most context that we have. We don't have things like, well, this statement, well, at one time, you know, this was going on, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then Kyopa said this. If we have something like that, then, you know, wow. We will know a lot more. Anyway, here, statement 17, following from 16, as in this text, the result of valid knowledge reveals profound emptiness. The last statement says, right? In fact, the ultimate valid knowledge or valid cognition is basically Buddha wisdom. Here is saying, so when you apply valid knowledge or valid cognition, when you apply reasoning, primarily, right? What is it to be used for? It is to be used for you to understand, to recognize, to reveal profound emptiness. So here, Khenpo Kunpal says, the teachings on valid knowledge reveal the result, which is profound emptiness, and the unceasing dependent origination, that is, the profound and the vast Dharma teachings of the three types of valid knowledge. And so here, Khenpo Kunpal is providing further some of the vocabulary, some of the categories introduced in that formal logic system. And so the three types of valid knowledge are said to be direct perception, inference, and authoritative scriptures. So in the formal system of study of logic, they say that there are three ways, three types, or rather, of valid knowledge. Valid knowledge that is based on direct perception, having directly seen the truth of something. They also accept that through inference, you can arrive at a form of valid knowledge. And the most famous example always used is, if you see smoke anywhere, then you can infer that there has to be fire. That's inference as valid knowledge. And the third valid knowledge is said to be the words of the Buddha. So here, there is still if the Buddha says so, it must be true. in that logic system. Right? And of course, then this logic system at this point, right, is not to debate non-Hindus. Right? Is debating the people who agree, oh, this set of texts, they are the words of the Buddha. So in fact, these three valid sources of valid knowledge, you cannot even use with other Buddhists who don't accept the sutras that you accept. But anyway, in this formal logic system that the Tibetans received from India, from Buddhism in India, it says these are the three types of valid knowledge. Anyway, so here, Khenpo Kunpal's commentary, very short, very brief, he says, the teachings on valid knowledge reveal the result, which is profound emptiness. And so now Khenpo Kunpal elaborates. He says, what is profound emptiness? It is the unceasing dependent origination. The word unceasing here should be understood from the perspective of the ultimate reality, where it is also unborn. From a relative perspective, there is cessation to karma, causes and effects when one attains awakening. This is the commentary provided by the translator. But here I think you can think of this, the unceasing dependent origination. So I don't know if that footnote is that helpful for me. I think here, when Khenpo Kunpal says unceasing dependent origination, is saying, even at the state of Buddha, you cannot say that dependent origination is finished. Yeah, you cannot say that dependent origination is finished. This is overstating things. And sometimes you find this in Buddhist material. Oh, Buddhas are beyond cause and effect. Buddhas are no longer subject to cause and effect. When you are enlightened, there's no more cause and effect. Often you'll hear this statement. Jigten Sungkun will say, well, no, it's not that when you're enlightened, there's no more cause and effect. And he says, when you are enlightened, the evidence, in fact, that you're enlightened is, at that point, everything you say, you do, you think, you feel, is in complete accord with how cause and effect works. There is not even any situation whereby you could be tempted, or you could make a wrong move, so to say, where happiness is what you and everyone wants. You mistakenly create the causes of suffering. It's in that way that we say, when you are awake, when you are Buddha, cause and effect is no longer there. But not literally cause and effect is no longer there. But that you don't have to be standing there thinking, well, which thing should I do? What should I choose? It says, no, cause and effect, is the nature of reality. The nature and the playing out of reality. This takes us back to the first Vajra statement. That the Buddha, that all his teachings, all the Buddha's teachings, what they reveal, what they show, is the nature, or you could also say the playing out of all phenomena. The nature of all phenomena, emptiness. How that emptiness plays out, how that actually plays out in the realm of relative reality, cause and effect, karmic causality. And so that is kind of a distinguishing characteristic of Kyoba Rinpoche's teachings. The non-duality of emptiness and dependent origination, or emptiness and karmic causality. For all intents and purposes, right, dependent origination and karmic causality are two ways of talking about the same thing. And this is said to be what also Nagarjuna emphasizes. This emptiness and dependent origination being not two, non-dual. And here, Kyoba Jigten Sungen continues in that emphasis. Although, again, I think in one of our past classes, I said, you can think of Nagarjuna as primarily teaching all things being equal, meaning emptiness and dependent origination or karmic causality are two sides of the same coin, right? Keeping that without losing sight of that, you can understand Nagarjuna in India as teaching more the emptiness side of things and using more sutra expressions, sutra means, sutra sources to teach that. Then in Tibet, Kyoba Rinpoche, again, given that emptiness and dependent origination are not two, but two sides of the same coin, but here he teaches more, emphasizes more the dependent origination side of things, the karmic causality side of things, and using, you could say, Vajrayana, Mahamudra, sources and language and expressions. So in this way, it's said that Jigten Sungen is an emanation of Nagarjuna. I think we say that, right? Sometimes also, why we say that, I think sometimes, again, people get carried away. Because it gets carried away in the direction of, oh, Jigten Sungen is so great, so great, so great. He's Nagarjuna, here's Nagarjuna. I think we're missing the point if we think that, when we say Jigten Sungen is the reincarnation of Nagarjuna in Tibet, we miss the point if we think in sectarian terms. That's what I would say. I said, wow, our founder is Nagarjuna, is so great, so great, so great, Then other people say, well, our founder is the Buddhas of the past, present, and future. It's called Guru Rinpoche. Then you get into these, which misses the point. The point that Jigten Sungen is the reincarnation or the emanation of Nagarjuna is to tell us that his style of teaching, what he emphasizes, is very similar and close to what we know Nagarjuna taught. So we pay attention to what are the similarities. So it's easy, a lot of these praises, always state this great master is great in this way, great in that way, and we get carried away into a theistic mode, I would say, into like this God-worshipping mode. Oh, you are so great, you are so wonderful, wow, wow, wow. And we completely miss the point, And worse yet, it becomes, wow, my founder is so great. I belong to a system started by someone who is so amazing. Yeah, my system is started by the Son of God, who is also God himself. Then we're back to, my religion is better than your religion. So don't relate to these praises in this way. Changju sem chorim poche ma ge banang ge gyuji ge ba nyam pa me ba ya gong ne gong du be wa. Okay, I see all of you tomorrow. So we'll do daily on the weekdays until we don't. Impermanence, right? Already I'm thinking, once we all have a good experience of the Aji Sang, then I might start introducing other things, for that first half hour. And not completely new, things that you have already seen before. Then over time, slowly, we become more and more familiar with a core group of practices that may come into good use. We say that all these different practices, of course, if you have such strong, clear understanding and confidence, just chanting one Manipulame mantra can accomplish all the things that you want to accomplish. But of course, most of us are not on that level. And so then the Buddha gave different interdependences, different methods, different interdependences. And yes, some of them look kind of magical. Some of them looks kind of like, like ritual. Then, of course, some is, over time, people make those rituals longer and longer and fancier and all of that until, what it is has been lost, It becomes just a very good PR, very good, looks very fancy, And people are just playing the part, and then after that, they are fighting, While they're doing the ritual, they're praying for all beings and everything, Then after that, they're fighting. Of course, things do devolve, but many of the things that we find in the sutras, in the tantras, the Buddha gave because there are these special interdependences. So these are the things that we, if we are inspired to learn, to practice, to cultivate, then when right interdependence comes, you use it and you can see its results. Okay, that's it. Bye-bye.